therefore writ petition is maintainable, then you hear the writ petition, the single judge was directed to decide the writ petition, etc. Now what is the learning from this? Therefore every expression which is used in the section, now nobody would have thought that the High Court was going to say when somebody cancels the registration. I know every day they hear the appeals. There are hundreds of appeals which are filed routinely before the appellate authority, and appellate authority also hears the appeals, etc. But in this case, his appeal was time barred. He has no choice but to go to the writ petition, and writ petition he lost. The division bench says no, writ petition is maintainable because it is not an adjudicating authority. Therefore, now whenever you face, so how do you make use of this judgment? Can anybody explain how do you make use of this judgment? In which circumstance? बताइए सर. सर मेरे को सबसे बड़ा डर कब लगता है पता है? When there is a stunned silence in an audience. सबसे खतरनाक होता है वो. बताइए सर. How do you make use of this judgment in your practice? कैसे करेंगे? What is the ratio of this judgment? The ratio of this judgment is, I'll make it easier for you. What is appealable is appeal is maintainable only against an order passed by an authority as an adjudicating authority. Correct? That's the ratio of this judgment. Now, how will you make use of this judgment in other cases? बताइए. वो तो adjudicating authority है ना सर? वो तो adjudicating authority है. Definition है adjudicating authority. Whoever is competent to pass an order as an adjudicating authority. Yes, sir. Penalty is levied under 129, 130. No adjudication process. Okay. Good thinking. Yes. बताइए. Okay. यहाँ पे सर. Hierarchy. Very good. Beyond jurisdiction. What do you mean by that, sir? And therefore he is not an adjudicating authority. Okay. All right. Hanji? Bank account attachment. Okay. They may not be conferred that power. Very good. अब ये बताइए, ये सब सोच आपको कैसे आता है बताइए. Tell me. And how did this happen? I'm sure you must have read this judgment also previously. At least one of you or two of you must have read it. Correct? उस समय ये सोच आया कि नहीं आया? नहीं आया. क्यों नहीं आया? Questioning नहीं, वो नहीं है. Because you read the judgment with a particular purpose. Transactional. आज ये आया, काम आया, उस काम के लिए क्या निपटना है उतना रिलेवेंस है. नहीं. Don't read a judgment as for transactional purpose. Read a judgment as a story. My request to all of you is, you will be able to remember it for your lifetime. I guarantee you that. You will be able to remember all the judgments to your lifetime if you read it like a story. आपने बचपन में पढ़ा होगा, इतनी सारी स्टोरीज पढ़े होंगे, क्राइम स्टोरीज पढ़े होंगे, लव स्टोरीज पढ़े होंगे, वो सब आपको आज भी याद है. याद तो है ना? 90% of them you remember even today. And why do you remember? Because you read it like a story and you wanted to remember, therefore you remember. Same way judgments also. Read them like stories and you will remember it for your lifetime. You will never forget them. And you will remember it by the author who has written. There are very different ways of remembering judgment. Sometimes you remember by the judge who has written the judgment. Sometimes you remember the judgment by the person who has argued that case. उस तरीके से आप याद रखोगे. Once you read the judgment, you will know the complete background of that. Then you will know in which situation to apply it. So for example, in this case, therefore, every time when a question comes, whether my order is appealable, etc. or not, or do I, because आप writ petition में जाओगे, the first question that comes is alternative remedy. Correct? This order is appealable, why don't you go to the authority, etc. So how do you overcome that? Then you must examine this first, whether he is an adjudicating authority or not. On the face of it, this judgment will look against you, saying that, acha, appeal is not maintainable. अरे appeal नहीं maintainable तो फिर क्या करेंगे? Then you therefore apply this judgment. How do you make use of it? Understand the concept of adjudicating authority. Understand the definition of adjudicating authority. Is he really adjudicating a dispute between the parties, etc., or is he doing an administrative function? There are different aspects of it. Apply all of them and then come to a conclusion. And then see how you can further make use of it in very different situations, etc. Now, therefore, we come to this. I do not know how many. Yes. Now, this is what I said. It may seem like setbacks, but they will give you fresh opportunities for it. For example, sir, today, the NYS judgment which I told you, there are hundreds and hundreds of notices only based on that. And because you have been pushed to the wall, people have come up with, the practitioners have come up with fantastic answers to overcome that judgment. They have done research on employer-employee relationship under the Industrial Disputes Act, under the Factories Act, etc. And they have now done a complete research on for an employee-employee relationship to exist, what are all the things needs to be satisfied. And people have drawn tables to say that these are all the factors which are must for something to call as an employer-employee. मेरे केस में ये सब satisfy हो रहा है, NOS में ये सब नहीं था, इसलिए NOS मेरे ऊपर नहीं लगेगी. On the face of it, that judgment was against the entire industry. But that has given an opportunity for people to understand the law even more clearer, and perhaps, obviously you have to fight it out till the Supreme Court, etc. But then that gives you an opportunity to know about more about the law, and then you also do a check on your own self with reference to various legal provisions, etc. The most important thing is, you don't take it lying down. अच्छा judgment हो गया, खत्म हो गया, there is nothing beyond this. Don't take it lying down. You must necessarily find ways and means to overcome that particular judgment at some point of time, and do keep researching on that. And of course, as tax professionals you will always find ways and means, like just now we just discussed. How do you overcome all these aspects? Then the last line is, of course, sir, it's absolutely clear to all of you. Every challenge, that's why I did not call it as a disaster, because disaster means it comes to an end. Disaster to khatam hi ho jata na uske baad to. Therefore, I will call it as a challenge. Every challenge presents you an opportunity. And therefore, look at that, don't look at it as a challenge, but look at it as an opportunity given to you to overcome that challenge. There are next steps to go forward, and then yes, and 5 years down the line, you will find the same NYS ruling is either distinguished or diluted, etc., etc. In fact, the classic example, in fact, I should have put that, I mean, there are very many examples. आपको सबको पता है कि GTA, that Goods Transport Agency, correct? उसके ऊपर जो the tax paid, whether it is available as a SENVAT credit or not, was a dispute right from 2005. नहीं सर, उससे भी पहले था. 4 में तो सर्विस टैक्स के क्रेडिट अलाउ किया था, 2008 से वो डिस्प्यूट चल रहा था, करेक्ट. Associates went and succeeded till Supreme Court, saying that if it is a sale is FOR destination, आपको SENVAT क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा GTA सर्विस में, ठीक है. 2008 में they amended the rule, saying that up to the place of removal. Place of removal is defined in the Excise Act, etc. Correct. Therefore, post 2008, rule said you are not entitled for credit. Correct, sir? But the assessees were undaunted. They said, नहीं, हम इसके बावजूद भी credit लेंगे. लिया. The matters travelled up to Supreme Court in some other context. And look at the irony. When it comes to the valuation rules, central excise valuation rules, the place of removal is the factory or the depot or any other place from where the goods are to be sold from after its removal from the factory. Correct? So people have always argued that in respect of FOR destination sales, if the price is inclusive of freight, you don't need to pay excise duty on freight. Correct? Excise duty आप नहीं भरेंगे freight में. Service tax will be paid on the freight element. So the question is whether service tax element will be entitled for credit or etc. or not. Assessees have argued and succeeded in Supreme Court say, I will not pay excise duty on freight. Supreme Court blessed that, saying that place of removal is factory only, therefore you are right. Okay. एक और केस में सेम जजेस आइडेंटिकल फैक्ट्स, द सुप्रीम कोर्ट सेड नो फ्रेट में आपका ड्यूटी देनी है, ठीक है, सेम जजेस। चलो ये तो हो गया। अब ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट में ये सनवैट क्रेडिट मैटर भी पहुंचा, ठीक है। सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बोला आपको सनवैट क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा, ठीक है। तो हमने सब सोचा कि ये खत्म हो गया, अब आगे तो सारे, एंड इट्स अबाउट हंड्रेड्स ऑफ क्रोर्स ऑफ डिमांड्स, राइट, थ्रू आउट द कंट्री फॉर ऑल मोस्ट सीमेंट मैन्युफैक्चरर्स एटसेट्रा. So there was one person who still did not give up. They were all pursuing with the board etc. also. Board issue again a wishy-washy clarification. वो जजमेंट वैल्यूएशन के लिए लगेगा, वो सनवैट पे नहीं लगेगा, फिर भी यू लुक एट ऑल फैक्ट्स एंड सर्कमस्टांसेस एंड लीगल पोजीशन एंड डिसाइड करके एक सर्कुलर इश्यू कराया. ठीक है. Then one assessee went and argued in the Ahmedabad bench of the tribunal, saying that for my case the other judgment of the Supreme Court will apply and therefore I am entitled for credit. The Ahmedabad tribunal held in his favor. Department went to High Court, they lost it in the High Court also. उस जजमेंट को फॉलो करके all tribunal judgments held in favor of the assessee, saying that you are entitled for the credit. And there was a difference of opinion, then they constituted a full bench in the tribunal, 3-judge bench of the tribunal. They also held in favor of the assessee. So there is a judgment of 2014 of the Supreme Court. Despite that, they distinguished it on some basis and they succeeded. And all assessees have now succeeded before the tribunal. Some of the high courts are also held again in their favor. This is just to point out that please don't take any so-called adverse judgment lying down and say as if life has come to an end. Life doesn't come to an end with an adverse judgment. It comes with more opportunities to you. It is your skill to make use of it. And please don't take it lying down. This is all I have to say. If you have any questions, I am open to answer them.
If any questions. So we have no questions?
Thing is very clear. What I do, I'll tell you. Today you have multiple journals, ठीक है. एक हफ्ते में कम से कम अगर टैक्स के आप लोग कम से कम 25-30 जेट, ठीक है, उससे ज़्यादा भी. अविनाश सर ज़्यादा पता है बिकॉज बेचारे इतने ज़्यादा जजमेंट उनको खुद का होता है. हमारा तो छोड़ दो, उनका खुद का इतना जजमेंट होता है. These are meant to fail when you are supposed to.
So you can use this mic if you want.
Lawyer will fail in winter. So the best way what we do in our office, when you have physical journals etc., you distribute it amongst the people. And you must have, there is something called as a case law digesting session. If you are 4 people, doesn't matter. Read together. It is impossible for any one single individual to read all the judgments in the last 1 week and remember all of them. नहीं होगा सर, नहीं होगा, हो ही नहीं सकता. पुराने ज़माने में आपको एक ELT आता था 15 दिन में एक बार, ठीक है, STR आता था, SCC वगैरह आता था. आज तो रोज 10 जजमेंट आती है. एंड वो आपको ऑनलाइन में भी आएगा, अनरिपोर्टेड आएगा, सी स्टार्ट की इतनी सारी बेंचेस है, GST ट्राइब्यूनल आएगा तो और मज़ा है. क्योंकि आपके इलाहाबाद में एक बेंच होगा, लखनऊ में एक बेंच होगा, आपको यहां पे मुंबई में एक होगा, थाने में एक होगा. एंड टेक इट फ्रॉम मी, मुंबई विल नॉट अग्री विथ थाने, थाने विल नॉट अग्री विथ फरीदाबाद. वो तो होना ही नहीं है. जब सेंटर बेंच इज नॉट अग्रीइंग विथ सेंटर, वेयर इज द क्वेश्चन ऑफ स्टेट बेंच अग्रीइंग विथ सेंटर? वो तो आपको तो फॉरगेट अबाउट द इंडस्ट्री एटसेट्रा, उनको तो छोड़ दो आप, हमारे तो मजे ही मजे. ठीक है. एनीवे, so therefore the best way to store is, one, you must read them on a distributive basis and discuss them on a weekly basis and make notes of it. There is no other way except to make notes of it and remember them. Usse I don't think there is any other. You may have an electronic device in which you may note down, but वो note down करना बहुत जरूरी है. उससे बिना नहीं हो पाएगा आपका. Yes sir. आप इधर आ जाइए ना सर. माइक तो काम नहीं करेगा, छोड़िए. हाँ.
Hello. So they took an advance ruling from the Gujarat advance ruling. Okay, and they got a favorable reply. उसमें ITC allow कर दिया. There was the same people, the same organization done a conference again in Indore. Okay, where we have taken the ITC. So whether वहाँ चलेगा, अभी तक तो कुछ they have not assessed anything. So whether it will work or it will not work actually.
Sir, though you asked the questions, I have only one more counter question. I'll answer that also.
Sir,
Okay.
I am not a GST person, so ज़्यादा मत पूछिए sir.
नहीं बिल्कुल है. GST है ही नहीं इसमें. GST है ही नहीं इसमें. मैं बताता हूँ. जो सवाल आपने पूछा, so you want an answer from the mind or from the heart? आपकी चाहत से पूछ रहे हो आप, सही पोजीशन क्या पूछ रहे हो? चाहत तो ये होती है कि हम एक जगह ले लिया, सारी जगह लागू होना है, वो तो चाहत है. ठीक है. चाहत तो नहीं होना है, वो तो छोड़ दो आप. द करेक्ट पोजीशन इज, हाँ, क्लाइंट्स तो सर वो बचाना आपका काम है. ठीक है. See, the correct position is that once a ruling is obtained from any state authority, any authority for that matter, because he is interpreting that provision, then it should naturally bind everybody. Okay. But unfortunately, that's not the way they look at it. Okay. And I'll give you one more reason why. Forget about advance ruling, sir. Supreme Court has gone to the extent of saying GST Council recommendation is not binding on the states. जबकि वो आर्ग्यू नहीं किया उस जजमेंट में, उसको लेना देना नहीं था. जिस जजमेंट में ये लिखा गया है कि जीएसटी काउंसिल रिकमेंडेशन इज ओनली रिकमेंडेटरी, इट इज नॉट बाइंडिंग, दैट वाज नॉट रियली द आर्ग्यूमेंट नेसेसरी फॉर दैट केस, बट समबडी आर्ग्यूड इट फॉर सम पर्पस and Supreme Court took it as if that's the major argument in that case, and then gave a detailed lecture on that, and then say how GST Council recommendation is not binding, it is only persuasive, etc. ठीक है. अगर GST Council का ही वही हालत है तो आप एडवांस रूलिंग को तो आप देख ही सकते हो. बाकी क्वेश्चन आप सक्सेना साहब से पूछ लीजिएगा. ठीक है. उनसे भी तो कुछ बचाना है ना.
I would like to thank on behalf of everyone to B.L. Narasimha sir for sparing your invaluable time to enlighten us on how to read case studies, how to make use of adverse decisions, and how to look for opportunity in challenges. Thank you for your guidance, sir, and making this session so lively post-lunch. Thank you, members, for your active participation. Please be seated for the next session.
A very good afternoon to everyone. I, on behalf of WIRC, welcome you all to our last session of National Conference on GST. To start with, I would like to request the speakers and the panelists for today to join me on the stage, starting with CA Shalendra Saxena, sir. Please welcome them with a huge round of applause. CA Avinash Poddar, sir. CA Amitabh Khemka, sir. CA Jigar Doshi. Please welcome our panelists with a huge round of applause. I'm very sure every one of us had tea and we are energized. And welcome our moderator, CA Deepa Thakkar, sir. So before we start the discussion, let me introduce our panelist and moderator for today. Our first panelist, Dr. C.A. Shalendra Saxena. He is a practicing chartered accountant by profession in the field of GST and indirect taxation. He graduated in commerce from Jodhpur University and he is a qualified certified fraud examiner from ACFE USA. He is also PhD in financial management. So I request everyone to please welcome Shalendra sir with a huge round of applause. I request Dilip sir to please felicitate our panelists with a memento. Our next panelist, Dr. Advocate C.A. I.P. Avinash Poddar. He is currently practicing as a chartered accountant and advocate and has a rich experience of 23 years. To his accolades, he has 17 educational qualifications and numerous awards. He has been author of various books and he has been a speaker at various forums and had delivered 1,000 lectures till today. Please welcome our panelist, C.A. Avinash Poddar. I request C.A. Rahul Kekani to please felicitate with a memento. I request C.A. Swapnil to please felicitate our panelist with a memento. Both of you could. Moderator of today's panel discussion, C.A. Deepak Thakkar. He is practicing chartered accountancy since 1984 and focuses in the area of indirect taxes. He has been co-authored in various publications, presented paper on taxation of intangible property rights, impact of CST amendments, and written various articles. He has been a visiting faculty at GST Department of Maharashtra State and other forums. Please welcome our moderator, Deepak sir. I request C.A. Sanjay Kabra to please felicitate with a memento. Our next panelist, C.A. Amitabh Khemka. He is chartered accountant by profession and also qualified as cost accountant and BCom from Mumbai University. His last engagement was with KNAV as Global Indirect Tax Partner. He has a rich experience of 20 years in area of indirect tax. He is member of National Taxation Committee of Confederation of Indian Industry, Indirect Tax Committee and Indirect Taxation Committee of IMC Chamber of Commerce. Please welcome Amit sir with a huge round of applause. I request CA Vivek Ladda sir to please felicitate our panelists with a memento. CA Jigar Doshi, a visionary in automation and to move in line with the global trends. Jigar is the founding partner of TMSL Group. He is a chartered accountant by qualification and has 18 years of extensive experience in the field of indirect taxation. His domain of expertise include GST, custom, erstwhile indirect taxes, and tax technology. He has been a committee member of Taxation Committee at the Indian Merchant Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Critical part of 15-member Indian group of ministers meet for simplification of Indian GST return process. Now I request Bhavna Maheshwari to please felicitate our panelists with a memento. And I request our members to please clap for our panelists. Thank you so much, Deepak sir. Please.
Good evening. You all got tea? Good. So I have no problem like my earlier sir, Narasimhan sir. Well, I know it's, a tiring day since yesterday. But let me tell you, we are to have question answers. So almost practical things. So you will not feel boring also. And the rich experience what our panelist has, I'm very much happy about it. And you will also agree at the end of the session that no, it's really wonderful. See, we have all practiced the GST law, input tax credit taken, and this is the heart of the law. This is the only provision where we get something from the revenue, right? And then it may culminate into refund. So for this ITC, hardly there are 6 provisions, 6 sections, 16 to 21, only 10 rules, 36 to 45, right? And simple conditions. It should be for business. I should have received that goods or services. I should have received invoice. I should have claimed the input tax credit in time, filed my return in time, and the last one, the taxes I should have paid to the supplier and the taxes should have been paid by supplier to government. Only these conditions, right? Very simple it looks. Many circulars, notifications and advance ruling and court decisions are there. And here the questions are already circulated to all of you. So one by one we will take up these questions and every panelist will answer that. And if the time remains and if you are really yet hungry for knowledge, we will also take up the questions from participants, right? So with this, just permit me to take my seat and one by one we will take up these questions. In brief, I'll put up the facts and the question and the answer will be given by the panelists. Thank you. Hello. Hello. See, the first question, will continue. We'll start with Sakshana, sir. The first question is ITC eligibility provisions. It uses different terminologies, like entitled to, eligible for, taking credit, admissible credit, claiming credit, availing credit, utilization of credit, and so on. So, sir, here the question is how to coordinate and understand the meaning of all these different terms and apply overall for claiming the input tax credit.
The honest answer is, when the law was drafted, there are 35 commissioners from the state, different state, and only 11 officers or commissioner from the center. They divided the section in between them, so you can see the different terminology in section 16.2, vice versa, section 16.4, 17. If we see, the interesting to observe that the legislator used the different terminology in respect of the ITC. Take instance from the question, you see the word availment of credit, taking the credit, claiming the credit, eligible credit, admissible credit, and available credit. These all are the terminology used in between the section 16, 17, and 18. The honest reason is because different commissioner distribute this section, and in absence of any alignment, these are the word. Now, taking the availment or taken, these are the similar term. When we eligible for taking the ITC, basic question is, you first pass the test of section 16.1, that's define the eligibility of ITC. Then condition of ITC, section 16 subsection 2. Then third test, negative test, you have to pass by the section 17 subsection 5. And obviously followed by the section 18. Then your ITC will be the intact. So these are the, sir, interchangeable terminology: eligible, taking, admissible, claiming. One terminology used is the utilization. Basically, when you utilize the ITC, when you file the GST 3B, and you at the moment you offset the liability, which offset the liability entry reflected in the ITC ledger. So that is called the utilization. Another important aspect, Avinash sir also throws some light regarding the section 16 subsection 4, which is always talks for the availment of ITC in books of accounts, not in written.
Okay, thank you. So, but different terms, so different meaning will be there, right? Now, I will request the other panelists also, whatever they want to add on to this, some justification or whatever, if you feel so. Sir.
Just one or two things. First of all, good evening to everyone. It's wonderful that so many of you are present at this juncture, because this is something which is unexpected because of the long days, 2 days. Anyways, this shows that ITC is how important this topic is. Anyways, now so far as these multiple words are concerned, I can say only one thing. Each word which is being used, whether it is eligibility, entitlement, availment, taking, utilization, whatsoever, each has the scope of practice to each one of us. Lots and lots of scope. Because I have understood one thing in my 24 years of practice, जितना ज़्यादा बोलेंगे, उतना ज़्यादा interpretational issue होगा. So the multiplicity of the words for the same intention will cause or invite a lot of litigation. The only thing that 16.4 Saxena sir has asked me to add, my reading of the law is, certainly it is taking the ITC. The word used in section 16 subsection 4 is that the ITC or the input tax credit for the missed invoices needs to be taken on or before, now it is 30th of November. Meaning thereby, where do we take the credit? I think we need to follow the chronology, and the chronology is books of accounts, then the returns, and then the annual return. Therefore, unless we take a credit in our books of accounts, it cannot culminate into a return, and it cannot culminate into a final return, which is annual return or maybe final return after the closure of the business. So therefore, certainly I will agree with sir that it has to be taken in the books of accounts. And I am not saying, and rather we are not saying merely on the basis of our reading. This has been read by and this has been adjudicated by the Honorable Supreme Court in Bharti Airtel Limited. If you read that judgment, Bharti Airtel Limited, in one of the paragraphs they have said that GST at 2 capital A is merely for the purpose of trade facilitation. It is not to be relied upon, it is not to be dependent upon. And therefore you need to rely on only one thing, and that is your primary books of accounts. So it clarifies that something which is more important than returns is your books of accounts, not your returns. Returns are culminating from your books of accounts. So therefore 16.4, as per my limited understanding also, if taken well within time in your books of accounts, cannot be denied by the department even after non-compliance or even after the procedural lapses of filing of the returns. Rest, the court will decide. The matters are before the courts. Yes, there can be an anxiety between many of you that 3 high courts, Andhra Pradesh, Patna, and recently Calcutta, 3 high courts have upheld the validity, constitutional validity of 16.4. So therefore, what I mean to say is 16.4 constitutional validity has been upheld, but the factual metrics or the reading down of this particular provision in a particular case is yet to be tested by the courts. And you have found one very particular judgment, I think, if I'm not wrong, of Kerala High Court in Hatim, wherein they have allowed the credit because the returns were not being filed with the outstanding liabilities. So since you are unable to make the payment because of the scarcity of the funds or the limitation of the funds, and the time barring has crossed because of that, and 39, in spite of having no clause of restricting you from filing a return with the outstanding liability, but then also GSTN was reducing or restricting it. So therefore the Honorable Court has said 16.4 will not be applicable in that case. So depend on your facts, rely on the Bharti Airtel Limited, and read the law very carefully. It says taking the credit. So I'll agree with Shailendra sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Amitabh ji.
Sorry, I have no comment.
Fine. Okay. Fine. We go to the second question, and that is to Avinash sir. GST regime is implemented, merging different taxes and including set-off and credit provisions of the center as well as state under earlier laws. The important decision was that to have the same impact on the net level on the businesses as well as citizens. And value-added principles have also been imbibed to avoid the cascading effect. The government had 2 options for levy of GST, either deduction method, and in deduction method what happens, say I have my turnover of 100 rupees, I have my cost of 80 rupees, deduction method 80 minus 20 is my value addition, on 20 pay 18%, comes to 3 rupees 60 paise. And the second option was about the set-off method, ITC method. And in ITC method, what happens? On 100, I calculate 18 rupees. 80, I calculate 18%, which is coming to 14.4. So ultimately, I am asked to pay, and I should pay 3.6. So both the methods, the result should be the same. Government opted the second method under the law, ITC route. Now, and all this by amending constitutions and making provisions under the law. So here the question arises, sir, whether the ITC become my legal and constitutional right rather than as a statutory right being on mercy of the GST law.
So the questions which is being asked is going to take 2 hours in discussing. Anyways, to be short and precise, I would say it's neither a constitutional right nor a vested right. It's a statutory right. Because the statute gives you this right to claim input tax credit under section 16.1 read with section 16.2. Subject to satisfaction of the conditions for being entitled to take the credit even after being eligible to claim the input tax credit, 16.1 and 16.2 to be read together. I am of the view that it is a statutory right. This has been argued while The arguments were going on in Safari retreat before the Honorable Supreme Court that this is a statutory right. Even the court has appreciated that you cannot say this is not a right. It is certainly a statutory right. But statutory right doesn't mean that you can claim that right at any point in time. So therefore, time barring is there in 16(4). No problem at all. This Honorable Court, that is Honorable Court of this jurisdiction, Bombay High Court in Mahalakshmi Cotton, has laid down a principle that it cannot be treated as a vested right. It has to be treated as a benefit or a concession which is given to the taxpayers so as to claim and pay on the differential amount, which is the concept or the very fundamental threshold principle of value-added tax. But in the erstwhile regime, the Honorable Supreme Court has, in catena of judgments, have decided, Eicher Motors is one of the most famous judgments wherein it has been said that it is a vested judgment. So therefore, we need to understand and appreciate that a statutory right which is given by the statute, if availed within the time limit which is given in the statute, which is 16, and if within that time limit the credit has been availed, then it becomes a vested right. So therefore, statutory right gets culminated into a vested right only when the time within which the credit has to be availed has been availed or taken in books of accounts. But in case we fail to claim that input tax credit within that time limit which is prescribed in the statute, it becomes a benefit or a concession which can be taken away in spite of a fact that it is a statutory right. That is my answer.
Thank you, sir. You would like to add, sir? Section. Okay. You want to add, sir?
No, I think Avinash has not left for us to add anything. Jigar, sorry, you want to add.
I'll just add few points which will obviously concur to you, Avinash. Basically, Mahalakshmi case for Bombay High Court was for MVAT, which was talking about 48(5), which basically said that supplier liability to pay and the recipient's right to claim the credit, correct? The same thing which is 16(2)(c), not 16(4), was upheld by Bombay High Court, that as a recipient you want to claim the credit, supplier has to make the payment. So basically it's a concession and not a right. So I read it as negative case for Mahalakshmi. Vis-a-vis, if I see Delhi High Court, I think in the case of Quest merchandising, that case said that if the supplier is not making the payment, recipient is not supposed to recipient is not supposed to reverse the credit. And they said that it's not a concession, it's a right. So what I am looking at it, sir, is that, or friends, is that statutory right and vested right are two things which I completely concur that vested right comes up only when a statute is giving in the first place. But if you read it as a concession, ITC as a concession, then the constitution allows the government to put condition to give a concession. And if you see that ITC as a concession and not a right, then all 16(2)(c), 16(4), everything will be upheld by Supreme Court in the upcoming days. So the major fight is, or other major argument should be whether it's a concession or a right, and then we go back to Supreme Court, Eicher Motors, which says it's a vested right available to you, and then we drive that vehicle.
One negative thing that has come recently is e-com.
Oh yes.
That has tried to settle that issue, but as per me that will not be applicable in GST. We need
That's
to
again
get
Karnataka
it tested. Yes, Karnataka.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, sir, here I would like to add on one or two things. Entitlement is a right, benefit is an aid. Once under the law, this is entitlement of the ITC, then I think it should be fine. I think we go to the third question, and that is to Amitabhji. ITC is the heart of the GST levy in the transaction chain, differing its eligibility or claimability till the transaction is reflected in outward statement GSTR1 by the supplier, or the tax actually being paid by the supplier is in fact improper or illegal, as said amount becomes the liability to pay with interest by the supplier, for which the authority is empowered by recovery actions under section 49, 79 of the GST law, even when said tax is paid late by the supplier, maybe say after 2 years, 3 years, or recovered late by the authority, it relates back to the relevant supply transaction date, where the recipient is eligibility relates back to that date of the transaction. Then, sir, why defer the claimability or availability of the ITC to the recipient? Don't you feel working capital will be blocked up?
So yes, you added one question which is not there. Will working capital get stuck? Answer is yes. But I would appreciate the last sentence or the question actually, because you started with improper, illegal and a lot of legal aspects. But you ended up asking the right question, I feel, when you're asking why defer the availability of ITC. And I think we will have to get into the history first. I think Saxena sir touched upon that. How was the law drafted? And as he said, it was distributed amongst people. And Saxena sir would remember that actually the ITC portion was with the Maharashtra Commissionerate. And since we were in Maharashtra, sorry if I can say that, I was part of that think tank which was thinking about how to go about these provisions. And I know that none of my co-panelists were there in that panel. So we will have to go back that when this law was being drafted, what was happening around? And if you know what was happening around, then why did the provision came? And I will take you through my journey, and I will request my moderator to give me a minute or two more. My co-panelists already referred to Mahalakshmi Cotton Ginning Mill. Without naming the commissioner, and you will all remember who was the commissioner, and he was one of my favorites because a lot of interaction happened with me. I was in Vodafone that time, and I was one of the highest taxpayers to the government that time. So I was invited in every forum. He had already won the Maharashtra Cotton Ginning Mill case. And the J1, J2, all who, if you are from Maharashtra, you know what was happening. And the word there was, the VAT has to be paid. And the interpretation, paid means what? So if you look at the law now, it says paid actually to the government. The Maharashtra VAT law didn't have the word actually to the government. It merely said paid. And the argument was, I have paid to my supplier. And the commissioner's argument was, paid ought to mean paid to the government. This is one background. The second background is, there was a missing trader fraud in Europe. And when this was being discussed within this small group, the fraud was $30 billion. Maharashtra was merely 3,000 crores. The law was being made at a time when the missing trader fraud was worth $30 billion every year. Let me tell you, in October 18, the European Parliament reported the fraud size to be $50 billion. In Netherlands, more than nearly 50% of the VAT frauds was the missing trader or the bogus trader. They called it missing trader, bogus trader, या आप बोल लो invoice generating companies. अब आप सोच लो कि हम ज़्यादा फ्रॉड करते हैं कि बाहर वाले ज़्यादा फ्रॉड करते हैं. And in VAT regime globally, except USA, because USA never went to VAT. USA still has sales tax, today also as we speak. Europe, the biggest fraud in VAT was from the bogus billing only. And the size tells you that. One more thing had happened by then. Hindustan Coca-Cola decision in income tax had come by then. मुझे TDS काटना है. I have not withhold the tax. The tax officer is saying the TDS which you have not deducted, you pay to me. जिसका TDS मैंने नहीं काटा है, उसने अपना corporate tax पूरा दे दिया है. Hindustan Coca-Cola beverages company out of the box came to the point कि बस आपको जो टैक्स चाहिए था वो तो मिल गया है आपको, उसने कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स भर दिया है, अब मैं टीडीएस भरूं या वो कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स चाहिए, आपको टैक्स मिल गया है, यू टेक इंटरेस्ट फ्रॉम मी. सो जिस दिन मुझे टीडीएस भरना था एंड जिस दिन उसने कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स भर दिया है, उस पीरियड का आप मुझसे इंटरेस्ट ले लो, बट यू डोंट आस्क मी द टैक्स. You have to remember, because all this was being discussed in our committee meetings, and the commissioner was hellbound कि मुझे महालक्ष्मी केस को लॉ में लाना है, मतलब लाना है, and I am going to propose it. And actually that commissioner was supposed to be the person who will run the GSTN that time. Unfortunately he was not appointed, but he was going to be taking charge at the helm of the affairs of GSTN there. Step back again to Europe, and I have just noted this. There is a European Court of Justice का decision है in Alex Kettle, where the same issues were there. What we are fighting today in courts, in Europe also they were fighting in courts. And what then this became a Kettle principle करके famous हो गया वहाँ पर. What the court said, and I want to read it verbatim. The court held that the taxable person can lose his right to claim input tax where it is ascertained, having regard to the objective factors, that the taxable person knew or he should have known that by his purchase he was participating in a transaction connected with fraudulent evasion. अगर मैं परचेज कर रहा हूं तो मुझे पता होना चाहिए कि क्या मैं फ्रॉड्यूलेंटली या उस बंदे ने फ्रॉड्यूलेंटली माल खरीदा है कि नहीं खरीदा है, ये मुझे पता होना चाहिए विथ ऑब्जेक्टिव फैक्टर्स. एंड दैट इज वेयर द मैचिंग प्रिंसिपल्स, द 2A 2Bs now, but what was thought that time कि let us give the objective factors to the business. And all this was read that time, and I'm sure you know that the State Empowered Committee of Finance Ministers gone to foreign countries. These commissioners were sent to foreign countries to read down कि वहाँ पर क्या हो रहा है, कैसे हो रहा है. And all this material was brought and was read that time. ऐसा नहीं है कि ये हवा से आ गया है. My interactions with FM then, when the draft law was out, ऐसा नहीं है कि ये आज आया है. In the first model draft, this was there. On behalf of the institute, we have represented on behalf of many forums. I was in Vodafone that time on behalf of telecom industry. We have represented a lot. And the FM that time, Shri Arun Jaitley ji was very clear. I want a self-policing mechanism. And this argument we were doing with in front of him कि सर आप अपने ऑफिसर्स को बोलो ना पकड़ेंगे उसको, हमें क्यों बोल रहे हो? He said मेरे पास मशीनरी नहीं है इतना. I want a self-policing mechanism. I don't want to create. आप बिजनेस ही अपने आप को पुलिसिंग करो. आप खुद देखो कि बॉस आपका जो सेलर है वो फ्रॉडुलेंट नहीं होना चाहिए. You control yourself. Don't expect me to control, have that mechanism. Now what is important is somebody thinks about the policy, फिर वो लॉ कमिटी में जाके लॉ बनता है, फिर वो पार्लियामेंट में जाके लेजिस्लेटिव होता है. आपको पता है पार्लियामेंट में कितना डिस्कशन होता है. अब जो एडमिनिस्टर कर रहा है टैक्स को, he has not spoken to the guy who thought as a policy. He has not spoken to the guy who wrote the law. So he doesn't know what was thought while drafting the law. And when Avinash argues in the court, and he was discussing today his experience yesterday in the court and what he had to face with the judges themselves don't know कि ये लॉ क्यों लिखा गया था, क्योंकि जिसने सोचा, जिसने लिखा और जिसने एडमिनिस्टर किया, ये तीनों को वो नहीं जानता है. So there is a gap between the policy maker, the lawmaker, the administrator, and finally in the courts. So we will have to keep in mind कि ये क्या background था, in which background this was written. सिंगापुर में अभी, सिंगापुर VAT is something more recent, and all these are matured markets, and I want to tell this. वहाँ पर क्या है, प्योर गोल्ड जो बिकता है वो गोल्ड exempt है, बट अगर स्क्रैप गोल्ड है तो उस पर फुल स्टैंडर्ड रेट ऑफ वीटी लगता है. मेरे पास प्योर गोल्ड बार है, मैं उसको स्क्रैप बनाऊंगा, मैं उसको तोड़ दूंगा, काट दूंगा, गला दूंगा और बेच दूंगा एज स्टैंडर्ड एट 18%. आई विल कलेक्ट द टैक्स, he will further sell, but I become a missing trader. Now, this is very rampantly happening in Singapore. So, when we are saying, I am addressing this question from a policy perspective, I am not addressing this question from 16AA sahi hai, nahi hai, how it is written. But this missing trader fraud is happening across the globe. And when the lawmaker has drafted this law, he has kept that in his mind. Today the GST rating system नहीं आ पाया, so there is a gap in implementation. कि भाई हमारे पास 1, 2, 3 नहीं आ पाया, फिर 2A आया, फिर 2B आया, वो भी बराबर नहीं आ रहा है, ऑफिसर्स के पास इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं है, GST rating system नहीं आया. But if we know that in what background this is coming, possibly that answers the question कि भाई मैं ITC को defer क्यों करना चाह रहा हूँ. Objective नहीं है कि ITC को defer करना है. And one last sentence, my fight with the commissioner was, sir, 1% चोर के लिए 90%, 99% लोग मर रहे हैं. He said, I am drafting the law for that 1%. 99 तो follow कर लेंगे, मुझे पता है. Thank you.
Good. Sir, would like to, no, nothing to add here.
Anything from your side? Shall I go to next question? Right. Now this is to Jigar Doshi. Question 4. In absence of power or mechanism for recovery of tax by the recipient over defaulting supplier under the GST law, how ITC can be denied legally as impossible performance can't be expected from any person? The doctrine of impossibility is there. And by the earlier answer, I can understand that the authorities have, passed on their burden on every person. Yes, sir.
Okay. The doctrine that you are saying, sir, is a legal maxim which is lex non cogit ad impossibilia, which means that law cannot compel a person to do something which is impossible. But this is Indian courts and Indian jurisdiction. वो legal maxim ही रह जाता है और यहाँ पे impossible करना पड़ता है. तो that's one part of it, that the law is mandating the recipient to do something which is almost impossible. What are we referring here? 16(2)(c, correct? 16(2)(c बहुत बार बात हुई थी. इनफैक्ट 2022 में अमेंड भी हुआ लॉ, बिकॉज इट वाज रेफरिंग टू अ प्रोविजनल क्रेडिट अंडर 41 and then it got amended. It then casted the responsibility that you can claim the credit only if the supplier is making the payment. Reference to section 155 should also be taken, where it is said that if a person is claiming a credit, the burden of proof is on that person. So if we see the law, again if we go to policy level, the entire burden has been shifted from supplier to recipient. CST law, VAT laws, excise laws, everywhere we used to call it as a supplier based law. मैंने इनवॉइस रेज किया, मेरे को टैक्स भरना है, मुझे चार्ज करना है इनवॉइस, मेरे पास गवर्नमेंट आएगा. If you see GST law, everything is recipient based. Recipient के पास government पहले जाता था. In fact, so much so that Madras High Court in DY Beadle case said that why are you going to recipient? At least go and attempt to the supplier first. Supplier के पास से जाके recovery तो करो, फिर recipient के पास जाओ. So directly credit मत रोको, पहले एक बार attempt कर लो. So what I'm seeing is the law is very clear that recipient is supposed to do everything which is impossible. Correct? But courts are right now, in my view, lenient enough. They are able to see that if you are being asked to do something impossible, they will give you a chance if it has been asked appropriately. For example, rectification of returns are not there today, but still there are high courts, Patna High Court and I think one more high court just said that if it is the situation was such that you are not able to rectify, your attempt was genuine, you have a ticket help from the help desk, still no one was able to solve it, you please amend your return, and they allowed the manual filing of GSTR1 return. So again, it was impossible for him to do anything as far as technical errors are concerned, but high courts are giving the relief. What I would suggest is for 16(2)(c, the things that we should do as an industry or a consulting world is at least go to the point where it is possible to do something, at least do that much, which is look at the vendor's health, whether they have filed the GSTR 1 and 3B appropriately. Today, if you want to go and check on any GSTN, we can actually go and check whether that person has filed GSTR 1, whether they has filed GSTR 3B appropriately or not. We need to ensure that the vendor master which is there is regularly checked whether those vendors are healthy or not. It's like a health check of the vendors you have to ensure. 1 and 3B फाइल हुआ है कि नहीं उनका वो देखना ही है और अपने 2B में या 2A में सॉरी IRN नंबर रिफ्लेक्ट हो रहा है कि नहीं e-invoice generation right 48.4 again restricts you to claim the credit if it is not an e-invoice. So all those basic sanity checks for the vendor side is what a recipient is required to do whether we like it or not, and that is what we have to gain from GST law, that this is a destination based consumption tax, this is a recipient based law. Let us stand up as a recipient and take the onus to the extent that we can. What is impossible has to be left to the courts to judge. Thank you. You'd like to add?
So what we did was, just to add and possibly supplement, what we did was we told our clients to have a specific clause in the contracts that unless you have paid the GST, I will not pay you GST. So if the vendor has raised 118 ka invoice on me, I'll pay his 100. But I will not pay his 18 till I see that 18 has been paid. Now, the way I see is this is the objective factor what the kettle principle lays out. And the fight which we are happening is today because of 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20. If you talk today of 23, 24 or 24, 25, each one of us will see whether 2B mein aaya hai, nahi aaya hai, then only we are paying. So possibly the objective factors of kettle principle